Dear friends, present here and connected online, welcome to the second day of the 149th International Convention of the Teosophical Society. First of all, warmest, healthiest wishes for this brand new year. A brand new year that we have the privilege to start here in this sacred place. May it bring peace and blessings all over the world. Today's program includes 2 short lectures, and so we will start as scheduled with the first speaker that I am honored to introduce, Mrs. Linda Oliveira, former National President of the Teosophical Society in Australia. Linda Oliveira is a second-generation Theosophist who joined the Teosophical Society in Australia in 1971 after hearing some talks of the philosopher Jiddu Krishnamurti. Later, her degree at the Australian National University focused mainly on psychology and political science. She was the national president of the Teosophical Society in Australia, as well as editor of its national magazine for a total of 16 years, during 2 periods, the second of which was completed in January 2021. Linda was the international vice president of the Teosophical Society from October 2008 until late 2011, serving 2.5 years of this period at Adyar, the Society's international headquarters in India, before returning to live in Australia. She has lectured and given study classes for the TS in various countries. Linda holds a strong conviction that a genuine exploration and reflection upon theosophy, the perennial wisdom, provides to those who are awake and alert the possibility of profound human spiritual transformation. The title of her talk is The Alchemy of Theosophy, and I request her to come and I give her the floor. Linda, please.
Respected International President, Mrs. Lily Boyd, officers, brothers and sisters from near and far, good morning to you all from beautiful Adyar. With the theme of this international convention in mind, I decided to speak on the subject of the alchemy of theosophy this morning. And would like to begin by observing what I think is a fact. You might think it's a theory. It's something that we can think of as the gap. The gap being a split or division between an intellectual appreciation of theosophy on the one hand and the practice of its precepts in our daily lives on the other. For most students of theosophy, I would suggest that such a gap exists to a greater or lesser extent. Since the reintroduction of theosophy to the world in the late 19th century, a substantial body of writings on it has been generated. The teachings are one thing, and they certainly hold great significance for many of us. But the important question that we should ask ourselves is whether they have had a qualitative effect upon the way in which we live our life, perhaps even a transformative effect. The spiritual unfoldment of a human being requires what we can regard as an alchemical process. So what is alchemy? It has been commonly understood as a medieval form of chemistry, the chief aim of which was to discover how to turn ordinary or base metals into gold. So the production of gold is therefore the traditional function of an alchemist. Today we find some broader definitions of alchemy. For example, a power or process that changes or transforms something in a mysterious or impressive way, and an inexplicable or mysterious transmuting. In time, alchemy came to be associated with the search for the universal solvent, so-called, and the panacea. We will come to that. A solvent is something which dissolves other substances, which are then broken down into their quintessence or into their pure essence. Madame Blavatsky described alchemy as the chemistry of nature, and she commented that the transmutation of baser or common metal into gold is simply the terrestrial, the earthly aspect of alchemy, for the alchemical process has deeper significance still. She taught that it has three essential aspects: cosmic, human, and terrestrial. So three kinds of alchemy. She wrote that the first principle of the alchemist is the existence of this certain universal solvent by which all composite bodies are resolved into the homogeneous substance from which they are evolved. This pure gold is also called summa materia, implying the ultimate sum of what is known about matter, or the essence of matter. We can begin here to see a certain correspondence between this and the transformation of the human being, in the sense that through a certain inner kind of knowledge, we can come to know matter in all fields of existence, including subtler fields, and that we can ultimately come to know that unchanging, pure essence from which we have emanated. What, therefore, is human alchemy? Because that's really what we are concerned with today. What does this chemistry of producing gold mean in a deeper sense for the human being? HPB said that the occultist alchemist, spurning or rejecting earth's gold, directs his or her efforts towards the transmutation of what theosophical teachings refer to as the lower quaternary into the upper triad of a human being. Or to put it more simply, not in technical terms, we could say that this subtle gold, or the experience of that unchanging substance from which we are all derived, is produced by the flowering of our innermost nature. And I think of that very much when I walk past Banyan Tree Circle and see the beautiful lotuses which are resplendent at the moment. For HPB, alchemy was as much a spiritual philosophy as a physical science. She equated the mysterious process of the transmutation of lead into gold with the transformation of personality into pure, homogeneous spirit. The transformation of the personality into pure, homogeneous spirit. She referred to the soul, or manas, was the way she meant it there, assimilating buddhi. The soul assimilating buddhi, the manas, the mind principle assimilating buddhi. I would suggest that this is indeed the very heart of human alchemy. The mind principle assimilating buddhi. Through this rather mysterious process of assimilation, there is an emergence into the one life. Now, there is a practical implication to all of this. This is not just theory. We can note that HPB essentially emphasized this assimilation of buddhi by us, by our mind, not the assimilation of us by spirit. Specifically, this assimilation of buddhi by our mind principle. Recall the teaching that alchemy has three aspects: cosmic, human, and terrestrial. Human alchemy is that complete transformation which produces a regenerate human being. That is human alchemy. The general condition of humanity in our age of Kali Yuga is one of over-pronounced egoism, along with an excessively extreme at times enjoyment of material things. We all enjoy them, but perhaps sometimes it's too much. And also, these things generally overshadow the spiritual and the experience of greater simplicity if we are not careful. Humanity in general has fallen sway to self-interest in many forms. And that's why theosophy is a marvelous thing, because it helps us understand ourselves so much better and gives us a vast perspective on life. So what is required if human alchemy is to occur? Well, it really requires a dramatic change within the mind. Fundamentally, we require a significant level of self-awareness. In Plato's Apology, Socrates famously talked about the unexamined life being not worth living. So do we have the courage to really look at ourselves and look at our lives? Can we see ourselves as we are in a balanced way? What are our strong points? What do we have to give to the world? And on the other hand, what are our imperfections? For we have those as well. It is not possible to change the ingrained tendencies of lifetimes overnight. Therefore, we can usefully undertake certain preparatory spiritual practices which can help to reconfigure the mind, render it more receptive to higher influences. And this will not be limited to the work of just one lifetime. Now, there's an interesting point here. The effort which is involved in certain things, such as meditation, becomes less arduous. It becomes a natural way of living as the mind becomes more infused with the one life. Or we could say, as the mind principle allows itself to be permeated by buddhi, the matter of which the mind consists will change in quality. It will become more attentive, more refined, far more sensitive to the numerous expressions of life which come into its field of awareness. This generates kindness and compassion towards all of nature's kingdoms. When they become truly blended and harmonious, our lower quaternary and upper triad, to use those technical terms, will work together seamlessly. Then we will know our quintessence, know our true essence, know our true self. The gold of human alchemy is produced by the fullest realization and expression of who we really are. It's a beautiful thought. That gold is that fullest expression of who we really are. Now, I want to make a distinction between two things. The theme of this convention is practical theosophy and the art of self-transformation. Theosophy can easily become crystallized as an accumulation of mental constructs which explain the universe and the vast trajectory of human evolution. Perhaps we can think of this as armchair theosophy, something which does not evolve a qualitative dedication or effort to change. However, divine wisdom needs to be expressed in our lives and in our deeds in order to find its completion and fulfillment. Divine wisdom needs to become complete. It needs to become fulfilled. We need to activate our understandings of theosophy in meaningful ways, or else they become selfish pursuits, and they're not really of much use, although we may find them intensely interesting. Indeed, an immersion in the teachings can help us to realize that we do need to examine ourselves. We do need to examine ourselves and quite likely change the way we live in certain respects. Theosophical teachings themselves can be thought of as twofold. Firstly, there are those teachings which provide a scaffolding, they provide a larger framework with which to understand the vastness of life. They're likely to be of great interest, perhaps particular aspects of theosophy appeal to each of us, and they can expand the mind, but they will not necessarily precipitate meaningful change within us. Secondly, there are those teachings which are potentially transformative, provided we are willing to assimilate them. Provided we are willing to assimilate them, not just mentally, but throughout our being. Such assimilation can help to elevate the quality of our actions in all fields of consciousness. This assimilation is a very beautiful process. From a spiritual point of view, it's necessary to cease drifting along. To cease drifting along, because drifting is very easy to do. Perhaps sometimes we even feel as though we are out at sea on a raft without direction. But spiritual practices can stop us from drifting. They can help us render our inner environment susceptible to real transformation. Some of these are well enough known. We have HPB's Golden Stairs, for example. We have the yamas and the niyamas and all sorts of precepts from religious traditions. Hence in some of our little theosophical classical texts. And then, of course, there is the regular practice of meditation. the simple act of sitting quietly in a natural spot or in a dedicated sacred space helps us connect more deeply with life. I want to talk a bit now about infusions of buddhi into a receptive mind. If we can allow times for stillness as we journey through life, then this light, which is part of our inner being, has an opportunity to make itself felt, to infuse itself a little more into the mind. We need to be still and quiet for this to happen. We may experience small transformations, temporary moments of alchemy, if you like, when the mind is quiet and available at certain times to this refreshing soul energy. At such times, our principles really do align, at least temporarily. There was an American theosophist called Emily Sellin, and I'm sure a few people knew Emily. She wrote that change or transformation, illumination, enlightenment occurs now. It is a moment when we are fully conscious and there's this transformation that occurs. It's like a flash of lightning. However, there's a very important proviso here, and that is that the personal nature, the personal ego, whatever you want to call it, needs to be subdued in order to harmonize our inner principles. For she wrote that all the elements of our being have to be united in order for this sudden dissolution of the ahamkara or ego. The fact is, we have work to do. A little bit also on Dharma and ethics in self-transformation. This beautiful term Dharma is quite sublime, really. It's quite full of richness. This does not seem to be moving it. There we are. It's derived from the root dri, to hold or to support or to bear or to sustain. And when the term Dharma is rendered into English, there are perhaps 16 different versions at least of that. We read about things such as religion or duty, virtue, equity, justice, good works. So Dharma has a strong moral dimension to it. A secondary meaning of the term Dharma is really significant and very interesting as well, because it also means an essential quality or peculiarity, nature or character. So living according to our svadharma, if you like, our individual dharma, therefore supports or holds us in our essential nature. It establishes us in the truth of who we are essentially. It helps us to live in, to dwell in and express our divine nature, to be a bearer of our innermost being, which is good, which is true, and which is beautiful. So Dharma is extraordinarily precious. Ethics, which are so well conveyed in theosophical teachings, embody the essence of Dharma, because through living an ethical life, we are helping to support or sustain who we are essentially. The ethical setting of our compass or of our true direction should be of central concern when we consider the challenges of lived experience. And we all have challenges. That's just life in the physical world. The fact is that our commitment to living the divine wisdom, or living with divine wisdom as our pole star, is tested repeatedly in the various practical situations of daily living. The quest for the subtle gold of human alchemy, the experience of that homogeneous substance from which we are all derived, the experience of unity, if you like, is the enterprise in which we are ultimately engaged. Some may understand this as the search for God or Brahman or Tao, for example. It's not surprising, therefore, that ethics really are a golden strand that run throughout the teachings. The question of motive is certainly important. Emily Sellon also wrote, "The contributions that we make, the efforts that we make toward any tiny degree of spiritual insight are not for our personal self-development, but for humanity as a whole. This is the Bodhisattva ideal. The same compassion that we might feel for ourselves," she wrote, "we have to feel for others." In a similar vein, the Bhagavad Gita stresses the importance of acting without desire for results. Light on the Path presents in most uncompromising language the problem of desire and how it can be most usefully directed. For one who is serious about living spiritually, desire is to be transmuted from the personal, from that which is within you, as the text says, and beyond you, for it says, "Within you is the light of the world." We are doing this. This alchemy is an offering to all of life. If we sense deeply life's unity, then the principle of ahimsa can become the cornerstone for the way in which we live, non-harming. For many theosophists, non-harming becomes a daily observation, a daily practice. It's expressed in numerous ways. It may be the diet that we adopt, or it may be non-harming in relationships with others. It might be a refusal to take substances which could dull and distort our natural level of awareness and lucidity. Basic self-care is important, for we need to be as fully conscious as possible if interior alchemy is to occur. We need to be awake. Then there is the mind. Can we set about training the mind to do no harm? Meditation and deeper studies will certainly help. But how do we function at other times? Thoughts can move so rapidly before we even know it. We find ourselves having gone through a chain of thoughts which take us away from who we are essentially. But if we pay attention, the practical application of mental ethics is learning to watch any tendency to think critically about another, for example. Such thoughts may not even be expressed in our speech, but they may still be there in the mind. We know that thoughts are things. We know that they have their own life. They have their strength and their effects. For the aware individual, a negative mental current can be consciously redirected so that it uplifts and supports another instead. So much for this. If we practice mental ethics, then our speech will be elevated accordingly. Recall that H.P. be essentially equated this mysterious transformation of base metal into gold with the transformation of personality into pure homogeneous spirit. She emphasized this assimilation of buddhi by the mind principle. As we learn to think more altruistically, we open that mental gateway to buddhi a little more. The term crucible is a melting pot for chemicals, but it can also be applied to any trial or conflict. It can be like in a crucible of suffering. It's normal to experience trials and difficulties at different stages of life, but it's particularly at these times that we have real opportunities for change in our consciousness. Adversity may bring out certain beneficial qualities, and these can help to give expression to our Dharma. For human alchemy, though, this thorough reconfiguration or transformation of oneself occurs through the crucible of experience. Trials are these opportunities for the mind become purer and more luminous as it opens to the freshness and beneficence of what HPB called the spiritual soul. And in such a state, love is discovered as the only reality. As Dante described it in the Divine Comedy, Paradiso, love that moves the sun and the other stars. Isn't that beautiful? Love that moves the sun and the other stars. And finally, notwithstanding the enormous global challenges that we face today, we can take heart from the alchemical possibility that lies before each of us. For many, or for any thorough transformation, any transformation of one individual does affect the whole. The voice of the silence is a shining gem of transformative theosophical literature which points us through the furnace of life towards the bodhisattva path. It describes in poetic, soul-filled language that increasing inner refinement which ultimately sees the flowering of the three vestures or ways of being of a Buddha. And so let's finish with a very beautiful quotation from that book. Out of the furnace of man's life and its black smoke, winged flames arise, flames purified that soaring onward neath the karmic eye, weave in the end the fabric glorified of the three vestures of the path.